Welcome to the Journal of Biophilic Design podcast. Many thanks for joining us on the Journal of Biophilic Design podcast today. We are joined by Ludo Pittie. He leads WSP's landscape advisory work and also used to lead their UK landscape and urban design team, guiding the company's landscape strategy and design thinking. He's also driving a global WSP exploration of the future ready landscape, which is striving to anticipate future needs and also embed adaptable design practices to create sustainable places that are ready for today and tomorrow. He also champions the role of nature in the built environment as a key future focus, and it has also led WSP's Biodiversity in the City initiative. We're really particularly excited about having Ludo on the podcast today because he's also speaking at the Biophilic Design Conference on the 17th of November 2025 at Westminster in London. You can still get your tickets if you go to biophilicdesignconference.com, or you go to Ticket Tailor and search for Biophilic Design Conference, and also go to our website journalofbiophilicdesign.com and find the Biophilic Design Conference tab. Anyway, enough of that waffle. Ludo, many thanks for joining us today.
Well, you're welcome, Ness. Thank you for having me.
Lovely. Can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself, please? Maybe also what personally inspired you to dedicate, well, your career, I suppose, really to rethinking landscapes and a sort of nature's place for people.
Sure. So this is a bit of a story, but we'll start right at the beginning, like any good stories. So I was born in France. I did a degree in urban engineering in Paris. And that gave me a very broad foundation of knowledge in everything that was needed to plan, design, and manage a city, from urban planning to landscape, but also transportation, lighting, foundation, infrastructures, utility networks. So it was a very generalist degree in everything to do with cities, but it gave me a really unique and versatile access to broad knowledge, which helped massively unlock a lot of systemic thinking in the future to be able to see those dots more clearly and think about cities as assembled of systems and systems themselves. And through my career, I started really early on doing internships abroad. So I had itchy feet from the get-go. I did all my internships abroad, and that set a new standard in the school where now they actually have one mandatory internship abroad as a result of showing what was possible.
Mm.
And that led me to my first job in New York, where I worked as a project manager in the Urban Utility Center, working with a lot of water companies, gas companies, exploring the future of utilities in cities and how key constraints and safety considerations were to be addressed. And from that point on, I then moved to work with a company called EarthTech, which has now been part of the AECOM group for over a decade. And work there as a highway engineer and also as an architect. So I was kind of doubling down between two different teams, learning different skills and knowledge across both. And it was really interesting, one week being able to go on the motorway in Staten Island doing reviews of highway features, and then the next we're doing projects in Ground Zero about the master plan for the new neighborhood. So it was really broad base of projects and broad exposure, and I'm really grateful to all the leaders that kind of saw my multiple interests beyond a single discipline and allowed me to not be just stuck in a single role. And I think that's what opened my eyes to wanting to do things differently. And I started working with landscape architects. And I was like, well, what are you doing? Why am I not doing that? And I stumbled upon urban design probably in 2005, and found the discipline as a really interesting nexus of a lot of the knowledge I started to be exposed to. And so it just so happened to be also at the time where my parents were retiring and I wanted to get back closer from New York to France. So the UK seemed like a perfect place to move to to become an urban designer. And so that's what I did. I was lucky to find a job as a senior urban designer with a company called Mouchel, which is now part of WSP, and get a career in designing better places for people. And I would say the first decade was far more based in the social aspects of urbanism.
Yeah.
The practice was very much grounded in the Jan Gehl and Jane Jacobs theories of cities, and so a lot of the projects that I worked on, being Brentwood High Street and other projects, were all very much driven by the agenda of how do we create
Mm.
places for people.
Yeah.
And that was very much driving my work. And I would say my career took a turn for broader landscape and nature considerations when I took the leadership of that team. That was a combined landscape and urban design team.
Hmm.
And by virtue of leading landscape architect, I just had to learn what they did, right?
Yeah.
And so the exposure and learning by osmosis, working with great colleagues, kind of helped really build my curiosity, interest, knowledge, and help influence my own research and my own work in the meantime. So when I, at the time, left Mouchel to join WSP as the head of landscape, I think that shift really is when my thinking and ability to engage more in those broader questions really started to materialize.
Mm.
So when I took over the team in at what was WSP Parson Brinkerhoff at the time in 2016, there was only 15 people in the team.
Okay.
And literally within 3 months, I was like, we need a white paper on biodiversity in the city. Pitched it to our ecology and biodiversity team, and next thing I know, we were off. We were writing this and published it in 2017, and that just marked the beginning of just an interest in shaping that thought leadership that really was informed by the Future Ready framework in the firm, but also my own natural curiosity.
Yeah.
And so it was really an interesting alignment of circumstances that kind of help unlock that and drive that. And really, it's only grown ever since through the Future Ready landscape work that kind of really opened my eyes to all those other trends beyond biodiversity, to then championing more regenerative design frameworks and biophilic design, working with great experts like Joe Clancy and others. It's been also the privilege of being a leader to attract great talent in the firm and learn from all that talent as well. So I think it's been really a wonderful journey where I wasn't born with that knowledge and all those attributes, but I think was lucky enough to have a career where the natural curiosity and the circumstances help kind of bring those things together at the right time in the right place.
Yeah. I think that's where um your point of difference, I think, is that you do have this such a really interesting background and journey, but you said in the words, and you took the words out of my mouth actually, because I was going to say it's a natural curiosity that you have. It's also interdisciplinary as well, and I think solutions going forward for particularly for cities or
Yep.
large scale projects, we need to have open minds, but we need to also have an understanding of all these different the complexities of other disciplines, even if we don't
Mm.
understand every single thing, but just to acknowledge the fact that it's not just, oh, let's just do one thing. Have an understanding. I do want to kind of like pick your brains.
Of course, that's what we're
Yeah.
here for.
So
Mm.
like if sort of future cities, I mean, you talk about future proofing and all these kind of things. So a city, sort of cities of 2050, where we're supposed to be like getting to this magic figure of, this is everything's going to be sorted out, it's going to be, yeah, climate mitigation, blah, 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 blah. There's sort of two sides to this thing. There's one is the challenges that we've got, which are humongous as political and everything else. But I think there's also some exciting possibilities that are already maybe taking place, or maybe that you're seeing that are, possibilities that are exciting you. And maybe you can frame a little bit about what 2050 is looking like for you.
That's an easy question. Thank you for that.
Yes, you're welcome. Answer like
So
10 words.
I know, right? So I mean, I think what you started with is really important, and I think that that was one of the conclusions from some of the early research and things that I landed with back in 1819 is that convergence.
Yeah.
That convergence of trends, problems, they're not, unidisciplinary problems that we need to fix just for traffic modeling. Everything is interconnected and everything is started to become really complexly intertwined and interdependent.
Yes.
And but there's also a convergence of trends, thinkings, concerns, and potential solutions across architecture, planning, engineering, and landscape architecture and urban design. There's a lot of things that we're all starting to think about together.
Yeah.
And I think that's what gives me hope. And one of those point of federation, I guess, is regenerative design, right? You can see so many different professions kind of getting around that idea that we need to approach this differently. And I think that that's the key, right? I think there's a realization that the way we've conceived cities for definitely the past 100 years has been far too extractive,
Yeah.
far too one-dimensional
Mm.
in the zoning, and everything has been very power and resources hungry. And I think the way forward has to be making cities more productive and far more multi-dimensional and adaptable.
Yeah.
I think that that idea of 15-minute city is something that has caught the headline and not necessarily always in the right way during COVID.
Mhm.
But I think if you dig through the theory and the six social needs that should be provided locally, you can start to see how actually the 15-minute city is another system to drive regenerative thinking because it's all about being able to have access to schools locally, having access to food that is produced locally, having access to health locally. It's all those different social circles that need to intertwine in a local level so that you can thrive and live a happier, healthier life. So I think there's a lot of good policies emerging about how we can start to change the system. Now the question is, and we see a lot of that work, all over the world, right? It's not just Paris, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's the great work done by Civic Square and, the 3 Degree neighborhood. Like there's so much out there.
Mm.
New Bauhaus, like you name it, it's everywhere. Uh, there's a flurry of, thinking that points in that direction. I think the challenge for 2050 between now and 2050 is the pace of adoption
Mm. Yeah.
and the leadership to drive that change because change theories are bedded into recognizing the need for change and the leadership that comes with that.
Hmm.
And so, we've seen it in the history of cities that have driven change over the past decades, right? Whether it's Ken Livingstone's and the Mayor's 100 Public Spaces on the back of the Gale report, whether it's similarly the way New York changed since the Gale report back in 2007. Like a lot of those cities, when exposed to a different policy framework, leaders can really latch onto those new concepts. And you've seen it with Copenhagen with the cloudburst work from Ramble. Like there's a lot of new theories about how to adapt cities differently, be it for people, for climate, for social equity, for productivity, that are emerging and being adopted. We just need to federate all of those a lot quicker, a lot more systemically, and get drive from city officials to start to deliver on those agendas.
Mm.
And importantly, that needs to go well beyond the major cities, right? It can't just be something for the C40. It has to be a framework that becomes adopted by everyone as a way forward. And I think that's probably the biggest challenge between now and 2050. It's that knowledge share access and shaping quickly how we get those solutions. I
Mm.
guess that's where the opportunity with AI standardization can come in, but also we need to make sure we keep the local distinctiveness, the cultural uniqueness that should come with those territories. Otherwise, we end up with same cities everywhere, right?
Yeah.
So that's where nature also comes in. Nature is hyperlocal, and we need to make sure that we keep those hyperlocal solutions to global system change.
Mhm. Absolutely. And you used the words right at the beginning there, so the interconnectedness. And obviously you're championing obviously the interdisciplinary nature of everything, but it is like nature, really.
It is.
It's an ecosystem, isn't it? You
Yep.
need to have all the different elements together to provide something. And there's already a blueprint in nature. We know we need
Mm,
to have insects that feed the birds that feed this, and then the stuff goes in the soil, and it's like we almost need to have a really simple blueprint that people can get and understand. And as you say, it might come in through AI or whatever it is. But I mean, but it is happening, isn't it? I mean, you mentioned examples there that, I mean, I'd heard of, but I'm going to go off and research them now because, we all have a little bit of a knowledge, but that's why it's really important is for you to, for us people to learn from, yourself that there are these other examples elsewhere for us to go off and research and go, look, this is happening. So we can then use that to lobby,
yep.
showcase whatever it is in whatever role we're playing. How do you see cities actually shifting from this sort of sustainability label that we spoke about before to actually accelerating the restoration of nature? And then also, what role can landscape architects and urban designers play in this transformation? I mean, you've touched on it there, but if there's people listening and they're going, yeah, I want to do something, what kind of advice would you give? So how can we shift from that mindset, and then what can people do,
Mm.
basically?
So I would say we we we've probably started to see a shift already within some cities and government officials on shifting from sustainability to more regenerative practices, but also recognizing the fact that recovery of nature is fundamental. It's, the twin crises of climate and biodiversity are interlinked,
Mm,
and we can't save one without the other. And I think the local nature recovery strategies that a lot of authorities have been developing around the UK for the past 18 months
mm,
are already starting to put the signposts for
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Whether it's the one you were seeing in GMCA, the one that GLA just actually has been consulting on in London for the past 2 months, right? Consultations just closing on that.
yeah,
And I think those should start to point towards the blueprint for recovery of nature in those urban, metropolitan, suburban environments in towns, cities, and villages around the UK because they are approached at regional scales. They were handled by responsible authorities. There's 43 of them across the UK, so it's a lot of collaboration between local authorities at different typologies of landscapes in trying to integrate that nature recovery into policy.
mm,
And so I think the trick will be now going forward the implementation thereof, and that's where the real challenge is. The policy framework was already a huge piece of work, and a lot of them are now consulting on those.
yeah,
Uh, and the biggest thing will be how do we start to access finance to restore faster? And I would say this, from the role landscape architects and urban designers can play in that transformation, I would say there's three key elements. One is really whenever we design a new public space, really think, just like the Landscape Institute would say, people, planet, and place, right?
yeah,
Those three pillars are fundamental to the design thinking.
yeah,
And I think being able to find the right balance, right? It can't be paint by number. It has to be place specific.
yeah,
But I think we have to find more opportunities for connecting those systems for make sure that water doesn't just go in the drain, that we actually are creating the right opportunities for nature to thrive locally, that we are starting to embed in some of the key strategic recommendations from those local nature recovery strategies into local action.
Mhm.
So I would say the next element really is continuing those collaborations that a lot of landscape architects have been doing with ecologists and water engineers in particular, right? Being able to design both for water and nature is fundamental, and the two are interconnected.
Mm.
And so I think we will see more climate adapted streets going forward.
Yeah.
I think when we were writing the new version of Manual for Street a few years back, that was very much at the heart of the new Manual for Street was climate adaptive streets are the way forward.
Mm.
And that's the way we should approach our built environment because there's it's fundamental. We have to start to design differently.
Yeah.
And it's upon all of us to start to make that shift. And if it's not in the brief, then it's up to us to discuss that with our clients to understand why it isn't.
Mhm.
I think there's plenty of practices that within sustainability we need to bring into our practice that we're not seeing enough yet around circularity in particular. I
Okay.
think that's one element that I'm really keen to explore and drive further is a lot of the applications around circular practices and how we can really bet that more into what we do in the built environment. Because I
Mm.
think we're lagging so far behind Denmark and other countries.
Mm.
Uh, and the third, I would say, is keep on innovating, keep on learning, keep on sharing, keep on talking, because there's always exciting things happening elsewhere in the world, and we've got a brilliant networks of professionals that come together through IFLA and other international forums,
Yeah.
and access and that curiosity you talked about earlier. I think we do see a lot of it in those professions, and I think there's a lot of brilliant learning from biophilic design that landscape architects and urban designers could really start to put into their practice, like, micro restorative spaces. Why aren't we seeing more of those in cities? I mean, that the knowledge is out there as to how to do it. So why can't we start to plan and design development, hospitals and other places that actually completely embed those principles?
Yeah, exactly. One of my biggest bugbears is when they put biodiversity net gains, and the biodiversity net gains is like X amount of kilometers away. And you think, well, there's so much we can do if you think cleverly. You can create that biodiversity net gain, or at least quite a bit of it, on the footprint of the building that you have if you think cleverly. Whether it's a roof garden, the sides, the small footprint. I did a podcast with Sugi, who used the Miyawaki method for these
Yep.
pocket forests, yeah, and they just need a size of a tennis court to build this massive forest, and the biodiversity net gains in that tiny 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 area is massive, and it's self-sustaining in like 2 or 3 years. So it's like what not to like, but again it's learning, isn't it? It's learning, having that natural curiosity like you're saying, to find different solutions, and the more we talk, the more we share, the more it will accelerate. I think finance is probably one of the biggest things, like you mentioned, biggest challenge.
Yeah, and I would say also recognizing value is the
Mm.
other big shift because
Okay.
I think, and we're starting to see it in the profession, right? I think, uh, but being able, I think that that was a big part of the work that Jane Findlay was doing when she was president of Landscape Institute, right? Being able to go into Parliament and champion the health benefit of parks and open spaces.
Yeah.
And being able to change the value conversation is fundamental to be able to shift policy, investment, finance, and bring that system to realign to what is the true value. Because nature in city is fundamentally not about nature. It's fundamentally about the people in the city. And if we can't recognize that, then we've lost the battle because it's really in for our own self-interest and our own survival and our own health and well-being that we do need that nature.
Mm.
But I think going back to what you were saying earlier, the reason decisions are made on what goes where, especially within landscape architecture and biophilic features within buildings and development, a lot of it will just come down to value again, right?
Yeah.
But not necessarily value in the way we might want it to be considered. It'll be more from a value engineering perspective rather than a cost benefit perspective. And maybe if we could change that thinking from our QS colleagues and clients to shift from value engineering to cost benefit, like, Treasury Greenwood good practice would advocate, then we can maybe start to shift the decision making on how the overall decision ends up with, something that probably had a lot more biodiverse development to start off with that ended up with far less because it was easier to buy a couple of units somewhere else rather than actually nurture a nature-rich development that may be a bit more complex in terms of landscape management, but actually might have more opportunities for residents to thrive in the long term. So it's value recognition to whom and the disconnection between the beneficiary and those who pay for it. I think that's the hardest thing to wrestle.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose as well, if you think about most when they are developing somewhere and they're putting their hand in their pocket to pay for the development. So it's a short-term thought process. It's not like how it was, say, in the Victorian period, where you'd have a philanthropist or something who would build a whole block and a park and everything else, and the family would live there, their family would live there. Do you know what I mean? And it would be a more of a community thing. There was a longer term mindset in terms of philanthropic activity, or I don't know, or sort of just looking out for the well-being of their community. It's more you used the word localized earlier.
Mm.
I think that's really important. Just to sort of look at this triple bottom line aspect, this the monetary, the social, and the natural capital side of things. How would you like to see the design industry? If there's people listening here, because most a lot of them are design industry, we do have the NHS and teachers and all sorts of families, all sorts of people listening. But how can they actually help clients and policymakers actually understand this and act on this sort of, as you say, this broader definition of value? What sort of tools can we give them, or what ideas can we give them? And obviously, your conversation in this podcast is encouraging them that. But
So I was just gonna start firstly with what you were saying earlier on development practices. I would say it's probably not that true anymore. I think that we've seen a shift already within developers,
yeah,
and
that's good to hear.
there's so many projects I could name. Whether it's the project we're looking at Earls Court with the Studio Red West, Hawkins Brown SLA master plan, or whether it's Mayfield Park in Manchester. We're starting to see developers, one, investing in nature, but two, importantly, also recognizing the importance of building those green infrastructures very early in the development cycle. And I think that's where Mayfield really stands out, build a park first before the developments.
Ah, okay.
So I think there is hope out there. I think we see more developers who are interested in that impact and legacy in the communities.
Okay, that's good.
And that goes beyond, Peabody has been doing that for a long time, but it goes way beyond Peabody these days. So I think we are starting. We've been seeing a shift, especially since COVID. I think COVID did a lot for the profession in helping rewire because we've been more and more disconnected from nature, right? There was a great article in The Guardian last month on the fact our connectedness to nature has reduced 60% in the past 200 years.
Yeah.
But I think what COVID did, it helped press the reset button on a lot of that
Hmm.
because a lot of us were locked up at home. And the first thing people could do and did the minute they could is go to their local park or I've never seen so many people in the parks than during COVID.
Yeah, true.
But I think it helped people realize and reconnect to what is the benefit of nature.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen a lot of changes from developers. Definitely that accelerated that change and shift in we do need to have better access to local nature in our developments and what we provide for people.
Mhm.
So I think it helped shape and reshape how we create healthier places just on the back of what that created a bit of a common ground and shared experience between all of us.
Yeah.
And we can all vividly remember those experiences.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I was,
But going back to your question on the triple bottom line and
yeah,
helping uh, what can shift and understanding that definition of value, I think the first thing I would advocate for anyone in the design and policy industry really is engaging with different value frameworks.
okay,
And there's quite a few of them out there. Uh, but uh, starting with natural capital is probably not a bad place to start. Uh, there's also quite a few different frameworks that are recognized out there, but fundamentally, I think what we're seeing is, and that really came through the Dasgupta review, right?
yeah,
The idea that we haven't been putting a monetary sign on what nature has provided us. We've just extracted it and taken it for granted. That fundamentally is the biggest issue at the heart of
mm,
many crises that are facing us today that are interconnected for many different reasons, right?
yes,
Not be just taking nature for granted and extracting and not thinking beyond that. And I think that that is the biggest shift in value mindset
mm,
is actually being able to truly recognize what nature provides. And I think we're still going to be decades away from that. We're not going to rewire our capitalist system anytime soon, just yet, irrespective of debates on growth, degrowth, no growth. I think fundamentally we're starting to see shifts in how government is already starting to adapt policy to assess how nature flood management schemes are valued, for example. So we're starting to see changes already
yeah,
in how that decision are made in that front. But I think we are also starting to see through nature markets how the industry is starting to engage with that idea that nature has a value.
yeah,
And it's not a perfect system. It's work in progress and it's an emerging market. BSI is still writing the principles and the standards for that market. Government has been working hard at putting all the foundations for that over the past 5 years.
mhm,
And importantly, uh, it has a clear purpose, right? It's changing that value question.
mm,
And unfortunately for us, that is primarily targeted at uh, nature restoration at a large scale,
mhm,
at landscape scale,
right,
right? At least for the nature, for the current standards that are set out within nature markets, whether it's PNG, carbon, water nutrient neutrality, or any future ones that might come up that might be developed into the future, be it natural flood management or soil. There will be more standards and more frameworks created. But fundamentally, there isn't one yet that exists within the context of urban
right,
settings.
okay,
And that was very much one of the key things we identified in our research with Islington when we worked on those pocket parks.
yeah.
The first thing we did was qualify, how much could we generate through BNG and carbon on a pocket park, and it was like £120.
What?
It just doesn't work in a city, right?
Right.
Just digging up the road will cost many thousand times more than that, right? So there's a complete disconnect on how you finance nature in cities and how you finance nature restoration at a large scale. And that's where, models like Suji's come in, which rely on ESG and corporate donations. And that was very much one of the models we started to explore with the Islington work is actually there are uh, a lot of corporates who want to do good and have a positive impact. And there are a lot of companies, even beyond corporates, within the B Corp ecosystem that do want to have a positive impact.
Yeah.
So, we have parameters and access to a range of people with different interests, but ultimately we're noticing a shift. And I think that's where the work that National Trust, Natural England, and Heritage Lottery Fund have been doing with nature towns and cities come in, right? The idea of the nature towns and cities accreditation, I guess, is almost fitting that space within the nature market of actually creating something for cities.
Yeah.
And they've been developing a draft urban greening code to help kind of put a framework for that. And I think a that's part of what gives me hope, right? We are all innovating and starting to look at what are the gaps and how we can start to fill those gaps and how do we shift the conversation and how do we create a different environment.
Mhm.
And so if all that research, innovation, enthusiasm and motivation for impact starts to really come together, then it does give me hope for 2050.
Well, let's hope so. I mean, like you say, I mean, you talk to different people, and some people are just so depressed and saying it's not happening, it's not happening. And I think also Joe Public, male and female Joe, are not getting that information, so they're
Mm.
assuming that it's not happening. And I suppose we do need a little bit of dissent, otherwise it will just be like quite, oh, well, it's happening. What am I bothered about? And we still need that fire in everyone's bellies to still push it through. But I think it's really important as well, also on the other side, to understand that there are these frameworks you mentioned, like the natural capital and all these other things. And it's sort of, if you're interested in it, you've just got to Google, I suppose, really, and look up frameworks and things. Something we are going to have on our website, actually, on the Journal of Biophilicdesign.com website, is a list of things like this so that people can go and, as a starting point, saying if you've got, if you urban information, go here, community information, go here, all that kind of thing. Um,
So there's a great framework that was developed, for example, by Common Land, and it's the four return frameworks, and it's a framework that a lot of people have started to reuse and adapt. So they are existing and are being developed out there. So I think it's being able to look beyond our shores and keep on learning from each other. But I know it's a challenge.
exactly. It's choosing the right one as well, isn't it? It's like you have to read the whole thing going, oh, which one's best? It's word of
Read,
mouth.
see, and test and compare. Correct, correct.
Exactly. Yeah. And again, learning from, oh, that's worked there. We're similar to that. Well, why don't we implement that? I suppose that's kind of it, isn't it, really? And then tweaking it slightly for your own needs. I did want to talk about stewardship and sort of getting people involved and things early on. In nearly every conversation I have with any successful, whether it's an architecture, design, landscape architecture, interior design, neurodiversity framework, whatever it might be, the ones that are most successful are the ones where they've got early buy-in from not just the people with the finance and the purses, but also the people going to be using it afterwards. I mean, what does sort of in your world, what would stewardship of a place look like? So once a city or a space or a landscape, it's been created, um, how would how can we ensure also that local communities feel that ownership um,
Mm.
of these landscapes that are created for them? If we have been successful and created these beautiful green, biophilically designed spaces for physical and mental health, how can we ensure that they then maintain them and sort of flourish? I don't know if there's any examples or anything, but I don't know what your thoughts are.
Oh, there's plenty there. So I think it's something that we looked at on these LinkedIn Pocket Park project, and we
Yeah.
explored an alternative stewardship model. But I would say, going back to first principles, the idea of good stewardship has been around for a while, right? So I think we have to start first by recognizing all the great models that already exist in the UK, right? And I think TCPA has done so much great work on that. So anyone who hasn't seen it yet, look at all the stewardship guidance on the TCPA website because it is a really good
The
library.
TCPA
The
means
the Town and Country Planning Association,
great, thank you.
which really was founded on the back of the Garden City movement. So it kind of really brings across a lot of that knowledge. But importantly, as you know, takes into account how things have evolved ever since.
Yeah.
Uh, but we have seen on large scale developments to achieve models that are anchored around community interest companies.
Okay.
So Barking and Riverside is a project we've been involved in, and all the green spaces and all the public realm is looked after by the community interest company.
Okay.
So it's not the council, it's not the developer. It's
Yeah.
created as a special purpose vehicle that will in perpetuity look after all those spaces.
Ah,
And so it's co-financed through the developer, obviously, and through the service charge and purchases. But fundamentally, it's an organization that exists to serve the community and help look after those spaces and create that sense of pride and care for their shared environment. And so I think that the challenge is how does that model evolve and gets replicated depending on the size? Because it's a model that can work well at large scale
okay.
and can do some good, but does not necessarily always scale down
Okay.
and doesn't necessarily become available at smaller scale. I would say what one thing we were looking at uh, for the Islington work was changing up stewardship models for new green community green spaces that were able to not rely on residents' goodwill.
Yeah.
Because that's the danger in especially in urban environment is you're dependent on someone at number 10 being interested to do some guerrilla gardening, and that's all you end up with, right? So how do you tap into both the local passion, but also create a vehicle that can help create the long-lasting legacy? And I think that what we've been looking at is, and we haven't finalized that, but we're in conversation about this. It's evolving the stewardship model to anchor it with a local institution,
Okay. Yeah.
like a community center or a library, a local community anchor
Hmm.
that can help, well, one, create a structure that is going to be sustained,
Hmm.
and two, can start to get organized around.
Yeah.
And I think the idea is about trying to connect a lot of those dots, connecting dots like nature prescribing, connecting dots like educating yeah, young adults and children who have interests. And if there's a school nearby, well, actually, you can start to connect a lot of those dots very quickly without too much effort. But all it takes is a bit of structure to help the community organizing without necessarily putting all the burden of maintenance onto them, right? It's a carefully crafted equilibrium and balance between statutory care and maintenance, but also long-term stewardship. And actually, there's a lot of opportunities that could be realized by connecting those dots slightly more creatively to benefit those who need to get their hands dirty, right? The incredible benefits of just getting those hands in the soil on our microbiome and so many other things is incredible, but so not talked about. So, it's being able to join all those pieces of emerging research between nature prescribing in Scotland and actually, well, how do we do it in an urban setting? Well, actually, different stewardship models is probably how we're able to connect those dots to get a bit of nature prescribing if you don't have a local allotment. And, God knows there's a long queue for anyone who wants one. Uh, how
Yeah.
do we adapt models that are more collective models? So I think there's a lot of, I think we'll see a lot of innovation in that space over the next 5 to 10 years for sure.
Yeah, that's great. And you say collective models. I like that because that's what biophily is about as well, isn't it? It's not just about, ecosystems of plants and green spaces and everything else. It's actually about us as well. It's about us being as a living entity, as
Yeah,
communities and that sociability as well. So
yeah,
important. Hence it also ticking ESG boxes. So when people trying to value engineer it out, like we're talking about valuing, it's like, well, align it to your well-building standards, your BREEAM, your well
completely.
ESG, anything that you can, because we
Yep.
need it. We just desperately need it for so many reasons. Um, you
No,
spoke,
100%. And I mean, you see it in Manchester with the Greater Manchester Environment Fund, right? It's exactly that. It's a vehicle that
yes,
provides grants for improving green spaces that are cared for by local community members, and they're the ones doing the application, and they're helped in actually implementing those projects by some great great ambassadors, but it's exactly that. Sometimes all the community needs is either a little bit of skills, a little bit of finance, a little bit of access to something to unlock a lot of social innovation.
Yeah, that's fantastic, isn't it? When you see some really good examples of it too. So, how
Yep.
can we? I was going to say, how can we? And we talk about getting your hands dirty and the lovely microbiome that comes out of the soil and everything that's so super duperly good for us. How can we green everywhere? How can we? I mean, really, how can we do this? Through rooftops and pocket parks, in a way that's really scalable and meaningful.
I think we've already got the ingredients.
I know.
I think the ingredients are already there, right? I think it's
Um,
it's and the mandate for scalability, I think it comes down to rate of adoption, but also, again, strategic thinking on where are those place-based strategy going?
yeah,
Because fundamentally, city and urban resilience, even suburban resilience, a lot of it is down to nature and natural systems.
yeah,
So I think if we can start to see nature in cities as a solution to resilience and health,
hmm
then if by changing the value framework, you can start to change scalability, rate adoption, and delivery models.
yeah,
I think what we've seen in Copenhagen, New York, and any cities around the world that have adopted either a sponge city concept or a
yeah,
cloudburst concept as policy ideas, really you start to see a huge acceleration in adoption.
yeah.
So I think it's being able and making the case for it, right? That's the other important part of that
Yeah.
is when you look at what all the work that New York did, there's a really clear value framework and economic case attached to it. And they're like, the return on benefits from the green infrastructure plan is 10 times higher than the engineering one, and it costs a third less. Like, why wouldn't we do it? And it's so the overall framing is such that you can't get by not doing the case, but it's important that more and more do the case to actually demonstrate and accurately at scale and aggregate the evidence that actually there is a case for investing in nature in any cities around the world, irrespective of your labor cost and material cost, that actually we can and should do this faster in more places. But I think, again, it's one of those things where we're at the cusp of it. A lot of it comes down to finance, unfortunately. But again, I'm attending an event this evening, and I think when the podcast will come out, the press release for that event will have come out,
Yeah.
so I can talk about it. But I'm attending the Flood Action Coalition launch this evening,
Okay.
and it's a new national coalition that's been brought together by the Conduit with
Oh, amazing.
insurers and major landowners and major infrastructure companies to help uh, systemically change how we finance flood defense
Amazing.
with a view to create a £1 billion flooding bond or something similar. So
Wow.
it's those things are happening, and that's what gives me hope, right? There's a lot of innovation happening in parallel in so many different worlds that are completely interconnected.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm hopeful, because actually there's an acceleration of those, and just like the trends are converging, the will and appetite for solutions and the clarity on the solution is becoming clearer
Yeah.
to a lot of people. So I would say that's the first fundamental one. The second one is also, I guess, from a design perspective, being able to find the right balance in streamlining nature-based solutions, green infrastructure, however you want to call them, and mainstreaming that and creating ways that maybe become more cost efficient in terms of standardization.
Mhm.
Not that everything should be the same everywhere, but maybe every rain garden in London should not be completely 100% different. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's finding the right balance in between, and I think that's probably the opportunity in helping scale that up. And we've got there's some great companies that are starting to do that, but I think it's a balancing act between modular thinking and standardization, and being able to put that against codification of benefits that then allows increased rate of adoption. So it's a carefully crafted balance between bespoke design and solution, locally sensitive, but also being able to start to accelerate change. And that requires an element of modular, scalable, adaptable models with it. Uh, and the final one, I think, is possibly going back to your point above on stewardship. I think that is got to be fundamental to have a deep reflection and new models quite quickly if we want to enable that scalability, because otherwise it's going to stay there as a blocker because too many people will keep on saying we can't do this plan because it's just going to cost us more maintenance. Where actually, maintaining green is way cheaper than maintaining gray because you don't need to replace the asset every 50 years. It depends on your time horizon, right? So I think being able to have those conversations deeply on, OpEx versus CapEx, how do we fund and finance and maintain long term? What governance model do we put in place?
Yeah.
And really have that broader reflection so that we can really unlock that change.
Just thinking about this sort of governance thing. So I know we're getting near the end, but just to circle back on that, if only we could join up the social prescribing, trying to reduce the pressures on the NHS. People are saying the better connect, the greater connection we've got to, I mean, we know this in Biophilic design, the more connection we've got to green space, the better our mental health is. Just imagine if there was somehow everything was all like in a big patchwork that was all joined together, that we understood the value, the added value of the reduction on the financial reduction on pressures on the NHS and other healthcare things and school dropouts and everything else. If we've got lovely pathways and safety and antisocial, less antisocial behavior, got more green spaces, this is a huge, huge financial benefit. It's just quantifying everything, isn't it? Bringing it all together.
Yep.
Um,
It's quantifying, valuing, and having the governance to shift it so that you connect the social value opportunity with the environmental value opportunity.
yeah, exactly. If you've got the will, you find the way, don't you? Really. So
We have so many mechanisms at our disposal right now. We've never had so many options. I think there will be more to come out.
yeah, well, it sounds really,
We
really.
we have a few ideas. We have a few ideas that I can't talk about yet, but yeah, there will be more to come out.
That's very exciting. Very exciting. We'll have to do another podcast. And I know you're going to be, just as a recap, you'll be speaking at the Biophilic Design, sorry, you'll be speaking at the Biophilic Design Conference on the 17th of November this year at Westminster in London. And it's people, planet and policy we're talking about. So it's all about why we need biophilic design for all those good reasons, but how we actually bring about change. And it's why it's really, I'm so grateful that you're going to be speaking there, so people can learn and ask you questions and sort of grill you and network with you afterwards as well, because they're just, people are so hungry to understand how we can do these things better. So
Mm.
thank you. Thanks for all the
Well, you're
work.
welcome. I think it's how we accelerate this going forward is that mix of initiatives, people taking the courage and wanting to have an impact, and also policies and standard, all those things kind of evolving together as an ecosystem.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, we're getting near the end. And before I ask you the very, very final question, the very final magic question, is there anything else that you'd like to add in particular at this point?
I think just one last thing, I guess, on advice for engineers, designers, landscape architects, anyone else that are, listening to the podcast now on where are we at and what needs to change and how do we start to change the value framework around this. I would say it has to start with regenerative design. It is the bridge that brings all those disciplines together and that helps create different conversation. We have to find ways to make that knowledge far more accessible.
Mm.
I think we're starting to see initiatives from the like of UK GBC and others on creating regenerative design frameworks and architects declare. No, it's starting. Unfortunately, it's not quite the same as what's happening in Europe, because in Europe, the EU is driving a regenerative agenda. Here, our government isn't. And I think that's probably the big missed opportunity with the drive for 1.5 million homes. What if we drove and created those 1.5 million homes in a regenerative way? What else could we create? And I think that's the big opportunity. So to anyone listening, if you're working on any of those projects to deliver 1.5 million homes, please push and drive and ask for more regenerative solutions, because this is our opportunities to start shifting the dial and answer all the questions we talked about earlier.
Absolutely, and as I say, it's the perfect alignment with biophilic design. It's what it's all about. It's all about it's people, planet, place. It's the ecosystem of everything. So the final question, Ludo, that I ask everyone who comes on the podcast: if you could paint the world with a magic brush of biophilia, what would it look like?
I look very green. I would say I don't know that we could I would love to have a world where everyone can have a view of nature from where they live, right? I think that would be the first. And the second one would be everyone has access to a high quality green space within 10 minutes of where they live. Because the spatial inequality at the moment on those who have least access to green space, who need it the most, is just has to change, has to be addressed a lot quicker. So for me, I think that's probably the one I would pick, is actually making sure everyone has equal access to a high quality green space within 10 minutes of where they are, because that would change a lot of things with it, and would do all of us a lot of good.
Thank you for listening to the Journal of Biophilic Design podcast.